Welcome to Creative Peacemeal. I'm Tammy Takaishi, a board-certified music therapist. Join me each week as a new guest from across the fine and creative arts spheres shares struggles, triumphs, laughs, words of wisdom, and more in authentic, thought-provoking, and inspiring interviews. Hello and welcome to Creative Peacemeal Podcast. Today I am joined by author Weinland Daughters. She has written a book called You Cannot Mess This Up. Picture it. It's 2014, and Weinland Daughters is a 46-year-old stay-at-home mom living in Dayton, Ohio. She returns to her hometown of Houston over the Thanksgiving holiday to discuss her parents' estate and finds herself hurled back in time. Suddenly, it's 1970, and she is forced to spend 36 hours in her childhood home with her nuclear family, including her 10-year-old self. Over the next day and a half, she reconsiders every feeling she's ever had, discusses current events with friends and relatives who have since died, gets overserved at a party with her parents' friends, and is treated to lunch at the Bonanza Sirloin Pit. Along with getting reacquainted with 8-track tapes, wood-paneled station wagons, and dippity-doo hair gel, Daughters begins to appreciate that memories are malleable and wholly dependent on who is doing the remembering. She redefines her difficult relationships with her family members and ultimately realizes that her life story matters and is profoundly significant. Wow. That sounds like a wonderful, wonderful book. I have not had a chance to read it, but I can't wait to dig in and I can't wait to share a copy of it. We'll be doing a giveaway for this, but before we dig into that, I would love to travel back in time and find out why and how you became a writer.
Yes. And thank you for having me on, Tammy. I'm excited to talk to you.
You're so welcome.
Yeah, my writing journey, it's an interesting story because I did not start out to be a writer. You know, I wrote short stories in high school. I was always kind of attracted to writing, but then I went and got a business degree. And, so my life took a turn where I had a career in purchasing for about 15 years in Houston. And so I was not writing, but I was always the girl at work. There's a lot of people like this, I'm sure, that I would reread my emails and think they were profoundly moving or hilarious and so I've always been attracted to writing my whole life. But then my husband and I were both about 15 years into our careers. We were both doing well. And his company said, do you want to move to the UK for 3 years? And we thought, oh, wow, when are we going to be able to go international for 3 years? And of course, they were going to pay a lot of our living expenses. So we would have disposable income to travel with our kids. And wow, who gets the opportunity to do that in your late 30s? So we said yes, but I didn't realize without a work visa, I was going to show up in England and live in this village and my kids were going to go to school. And then what was I going to do with all this time? I mean, we had been had all the balls in the air like everyone else and just tried to figure out what was going to be for dinner and if we could get all the laundry done. So now I have all the time. So I go to the University of Birmingham and take history classes, which was really exciting, but that couldn't fill all the time. So I went back and thought, what can I do? And I was like, well, I've always liked to write. So I started writing. And then I realized with the internet, I could get paid to be a freelance writer. And so it was almost unbelievable to me. And then, so I did that for the last 2 years we lived in England. I came back, had another kid. And then, so I was still home. So I've always loved sports. So my friend was like, you ought to do that. So I started writing about college football. And then I got a contract from the Bleacher Report. And that turned out to be my thing. And so by the time I got done with what would have been my maternity leave, I pretty much replaced my income with freelance writing and the contract for the college football. So now I'm a writer. Ding, suddenly, my life took a turn. And I still don't really believe, and I've had this book idea, which is the time travel book. I've kicked it around for 5 years, but it took me a while to take myself seriously enough since I was not educated to be a writer, to be like, okay, I'm going to write this book. And still, even when I sat down and wrote it, I had no real concept that it was going to be a real book. And I think a lot of first-time authors do that. I mean, I'm going to do it. You're not getting paid to do it. It's the most futile exercise in your entire life. And I wrote the book and I have a great husband who said, even we're just going to leave this to our kids. We hired an editor and kind of worked with me, streamlining it, getting into a story. And then it took me a couple years and it became a book. And now I'm talking to you.
Yeah. It sounds like you had no idea your life was going to take this turn, but obviously for the better.
Right. And I think all the time, if we wouldn't have gone to England, would I have ever written the books or done the stuff? And I just don't know the answer to that, Tammy. I mean, it's interesting how that turned and how I it was almost desperation that led me to writing. Like, I'm in this village and it's cold. What am I going to do? And these people, I don't even know what anybody's saying, even though it's the same language. So
it's interesting that you bring that up, because I always feel like everyone's got a story within themselves, whether they tell it orally, whether they write it down, whether they tell it through art or photography or poetry or whatever. Like, everyone has something within themselves. Ideally, they'd love to get out and create and share. So I really do believe that even if you hadn't gone to England, you still would have written your story. It just may have been in a different time of your life.
Right. I agree with that. I think it would have found me eventually, because now I realize that's what fills me. It's not just about selling books. Like, writing is a part of who I am. That's my art, and I think you're right. We all are artists in a way, only we don't see ourselves that way, because we're all creators of something. We all have a story to share. I completely believe that, no matter what medium we use.
I would love to dig a little deeper. Like, you've talked a little bit about what writing means to you, but from a creative process aspect, what are some things that you just really look forward to? And, what are some struggles that you've had with writing?
I think one of the biggest struggles, and I mentioned it earlier, is, taking myself seriously enough to know, that I fit in the writing world, that I have something to share with the written word. And I think we live in a world now where there's this validation process where we have to be educated or certified in some way. And maybe that was me, but I see it in other people. I'm not a writer. I have a business degree, but I think that's where we limit ourselves, and whatever we feel like we have to do creatively, that's what we should go do. And we don't need someone else to tell us that we can do it or we can participate, because that's not the way creativity works. It's something inside. Now, there's technical things about writing. I mean, it's a craft that has, but also there's people that can help you with technique. I mean, I've learned a lot from editors and I've gotten better, but we all still need help, making things palatable.
Mm-hmm. I really love that you said that we don't need permission from other people to be creative. That is such a powerful message.
Right. And I think that's part of my story as a creator, is that I didn't have permission and I didn't even know who to ask. So I just started doing it. So,
yeah. And sometimes people find that they have to give themselves permission themselves. Like, we are our own worst enemies sometimes,
Absolutely. And I think that's been my biggest struggle in writing that. And I mean, especially the publishing world. I mean, it's super difficult. And that's the same way a lot of arts are, music, like what we think conventional art, painting, sculpture, all those things. It's incredibly difficult to break in and to have someone take you, to have you seriously enough to make it a commercial venture. Because publishing is like everything else. If you don't know somebody, or you're not, and I'm not complaining here, but you're not a guaranteed financial success, it's absolutely difficult to break in and have something published. There's a lot of spaces being created, though. I think in a lot of creative areas where people are creating spaces for creative people to have their voice.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how, people can just put something up on their own websites and have blogs and, or go to like have writing groups and things of that nature, and be able to express themselves in more non-traditional routes, I guess you could say, instead of just like traditional publishing.
Right. And I think there is a way to share things. And it teaches us, too, that when we read amazing things that are presented in different ways, you're like, wow. I mean, this is not limited to the published world. This is not limited to the, whatever, certified, or this person won this award. I mean, it is open. There's so many great writers and artists that we don't know about that are out there.
Speaking of great writers, who are some writers that you've recently discovered for yourself? And also, who are some favorites that you like to return to?
Well, as far as recently, I think it's Kristen Hanna. She wrote The Nightingale, and she wrote a book this year, or was released this year, called The Women. She's an unbelievable writer, and she kind of ties women's issues. I mean, she looks at history from a women's perspective. Like the Women is about Vietnam and about nurses who served in Vietnam and then came back to the United States. It's absolutely fascinating as a woman, as a reader, as a writer. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. I would recommend The Nightingale and The Women to anyone, because it's a look at history through a different lens. Through the lens of a woman's experience, and it doesn't take away from anyone else in the story. I mean, it's still about men in the war. It's still about fathers and brothers, but it just highlights the protagonists are women. And it's fascinating because I like history, and it just puts a different spin and a different lens on the whole thing. And I found it profoundly moving, especially The Nightingale, I think, is one of her more famous works, but The Women is just absolutely profoundly thought-provoking.
I'll definitely have to put that on my list.
It's good stuff. Yeah. I like nonfiction, but it reads like nonfiction. It's just she had to research. Her level of research, whoever she works with, it must be unbelievable.
Yeah, that's something that I just have so much respect for authors who tackle. Obviously, most people have to do some kind of research for their books, but when you tackle historical subjects and things like that, or something that's out of your general knowledge base, like it's almost like researching for a college thesis or something,
Right. I really believe, my book is like a humorist book, but I did a lot of research about 1978 because I was 10 years old in 1978. But I don't know if this is true of other people who write about different times, but I think the thing I liked the best about writing that book was the research. I went all in. Like I was at the library, at the Houston Library for a week. I read magazines. I watched, now we have YouTube, but I had catalogs and magazines and newspapers. I read newspapers for the whole month that was the story was set in, and it was pure joy. Actually, one of my biggest problems with the manuscript was cutting back on my historical references, because I found it all so fascinating. And that was one of the biggest pulls to write that story, was because I got to do the research and then do something with it.
That's excellent.
Just a passion. Yeah.
If you're allowed to talk about it, are you working on anything else that is igniting your passions? Can you drop us any hints?
Yeah, I want to write humorist historical fiction. And so, that's an interesting genre. So I am researching right now that, but that's going to be more like the 1950s. It's further back, but not all the way back. So I'm super enjoying that. What I'm doing right now, kind of at the beginning. So I'm reading books written about that time period. Some of them are rereads. And I just read Revolutionary Road again, which is a fascinating book. It kind of looks at 1950s suburbia and puts it a turn on it where it's kind of dramatically ugly, but it also paints it for everyone just trying to fit into this box. So I find that fascinating. So I'm working on that right now.
Nice. Is there anything about writing your book that caught you by surprise?
Oh, absolutely. And this is a great story because I wrote this book my entire intention was I want to write a humorous back in time travel book. That was my whole intention. And so then I was like, okay, so I'm going to write myself back to my own childhood, because that's funny and relatable. And I thought it would be hilarious because in 1978, I had a bowl cut and I was off the chain, and I was going to see myself. I'm this outside adult. They thought I was their cousin coming to Houston for Thanksgiving without anything to do. So they were going to have to welcome me into their home for 36 hours. That's the premise. So when I get there, here's my younger self, completely off the chain. But what I didn't realize is that if I wrote myself back to my own childhood, that I was going to not only rediscover all the memories I'd made, because that's the book's kind of based on my own memories. So it's a memoir wrapped in the fictional tortilla of time travel. So I kind of had a lot of, I had a lot of leeway in writing this because I wrote words into people's mouth I didn't say. But anyway, most of it's based on my truth. But I didn't realize in watching my parents at my same age, watching my mother survive 1978 as a woman, and be expected to do all these things and not have the opportunities I had as a woman, and then seeing my father, seeing my younger self, and at first being like, oh my God, I want nothing to do with her. And by the end going, oh my God, I lived away all the good parts of that little girl. She's fascinating and I want to be her. I didn't realize there were going to be all these feelings. I had no idea that I was going to. And I had a lot of people ask me, or have had a lot of people ask me, so did you work with your therapist when you wrote this? I was like, no, I wasn't trying to do anything like that. I was trying to be funny and go back in time. But what I did was I wrote a catharsis, and I didn't mean to. I went into writing that book, Tammy, as one person, and I came out as really a better person from writing the book. And I was just trying to be funny, ha girl. And it absolutely, it changed me. And it really is. That was the biggest surprise, is how I changed in writing the book and how that turned out to make it so relatable to other people. It was like they're people who read it, they put themselves obviously in the position, no matter how old they are, of their 10-year-old self. And it is a moving experience.
Nice. I think that's wonderful that you had that experience that was so profound. And like you said, you came out on the other side a different person, and it's something that you're totally okay with that transformation.
Right. And there was definitely bumps in the road because, I mean, it's obvious stuff. I shared very personal things. It was my first book. You know, a lot of it's very true. But there's also something very freeing about that, is putting it out there and being like, this is me. This is who I am. You know, I still, when I reread it, there's still parts of it I'm like, oh my God, you know, what was I thinking? But again, those are the parts that people talk to me about and say that was, you know, it was so relatable to them because I shared. You know, to me, it was a big deal. My life, that's the other thing I found out. My life is a big deal to me, and that's important. Even if your story is not this thing that's going to be on the Today Show, or, you know, it's not going to be featured on a Lifetime movie, it still matters because it's your story. And I think that's what I learned from the process of sharing my story, all the things that I would be worried about sharing. Well, it matters to me. And that matters. And I think that's part of the message of this book, is that your story matters. Your 1978 matters. You know, your view of yourself at 10 and all those years after that, till you get to this point, that matters. It's profoundly important. It's more important to you and the people who love you than the things that are on the Lifetime movies and the Today Show. And it's just normal, regular life with normal, regular people. And I say that in the context of nothing's really normal, you know, but what we see as normal in our everyday mundane life is a profoundly important thing to human beings.
I love that. And I love how philosophical you get and you are about this without being highbrow. Like, you're philosophical, but in the most comfortable way, if that makes sense. Like, approachable, you know?
Right. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And I think the book did that. This writing the story did that to me. And then talking to people afterwards, you know, it's unbelievable because I never would have thought I would have this perspective, but I do. I didn't go back in time, but I feel like I did.
I'm curious, have any of your family members read it and provided any feedback to you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, because it's personal to them. You know, they kind of wrote me a blank check and said, you know, do what you want to do. Because parts of it are really funny and they're real. And my brother and sister remember them. You know, the more difficult part was I had, like a lot of people, my mom and I had a difficult relationship. And so here I am going to share. And I went deep, but I didn't go super deep. And I was really worried about that. So when I wrote the book and I got the book deal, I had the manuscript in a binder, you know, and it was going to come out that next spring. So I went home for Christmas because I lived in Ohio at the time. My family lives in the Houston area. And so I basically, the last day I was there, I gave them all a binder and I left town because I was scared to death, you know, and my mom, I was really afraid about my mom, but she loved the parts where I watched her and thought, does this really what she wants? I mean, does she really want a life in suburbia? I mean, my dad's a great guy. She lives in a great house and she has a nice car. But is this really what she wanted? I mean, she really fulfilled, like, where are her girlfriends? Like, when did she go to girls' night out? I thought all those things are right in the book because I realized I didn't really see my mother for who she was until I sent myself back in time as a mother and a wife and looked at her and was like, oh my God, you're playing on a whole different playing field that I get to play on. You know, you have no opportunities to do anything outside of what your stuff is here. And though I guess you like that. Do you love it? And do you like being a wife and a mom? And she loved me investigating those things because I come down the next morning after Thanksgiving, everything's cleaned up. And there was a party the night before. I'm like, oh my God, she's like an Olympic gold medalist. She put all that stuff away, the cigarettes, she cleaned it all up. And like, where's the laundry? This woman's a superhero, you know, and no one's even giving her credit. She did the whole Thanksgiving dinner. No one helped her. No one helped her clean up. I mean, it's 1978. And she loved that part of it, that I saw her for who I think she probably wanted somebody to see her that way, but to have her daughter see her that way, especially the daughter she had a more difficult relationship it was incredibly, I think she liked that, you know, and it really improved our relationship too, because me being honest about what I saw, I think, and me coming to talk to her about it before the book came out, I think that released us we were living in the world of truth. It was a good thing for both of us.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear that you were able to use your creative outlet to improve your relationship and also have it be relatable to other people, you know, because even though everyone's families, you know, experiences are different, you know, we can still find commonalities in, you know, looking at our own parents going like, oh, you know, like, wow, I can't believe they got all that done. Or I can't believe, like, I never realized that my parents did that for me, you know, and I took it for granted, you know?
Right. And I think there was a lot of those perspectives, you know, even with my siblings. I mean, my brother and my sister, they loved it because it was a lot of our childhood memories. But I also appreciated the fact that I got to share that with them all these years later. I mean, there was a lot of perspectives, a whole lot. Another great story is, I gave it to my dad, who I was very close with, and he texted me. So I gave it to him in December, and I think Mom read it first and he read it second. And he sent me this long text. It was like, I loved your book. It was like a trip back in time for me too. I think you handled the delicate parts really well. And one of the common themes was we don't share our feelings, because we didn't talk about stuff in 1978. And he said, I would talk more about my feelings, but we don't do that, because he was a play on the thing. And then he was like, love, Dad. And then he always did dog emojis. So it was like 84 dog emojis at the end. And so, like I said, I was super close with my dad. And then literally about a week after he sent that text, and my friends were the ones who encouraged me to give the manuscript to him and leave town, which I was so afraid to do. I mean, I wouldn't have done it without the encouragement, when you have a tribe of people that are good. They encouraged me. And though this is sad, this is really, a good story. About a week later, my dad suddenly passed away after he sent me the text. And so, but if my friends had not encouraged me to do that, I would not have that text. That's the only book review I have from my father. That's it. And what a gift to know going into the rest of my career as a writer that my dad read my first book, that he liked it, he approved it, without my friends telling me, get them in a binder. And if you have to leave town, but you cannot leave those people without books. And what a great story, that I feel like my dad carried me through the whole rest of the thing, because I had that validation that I really wanted, because he would been the person. There was 5 people in that book, my brother and sister and my mom and dad. And so to have that's a gift for the rest of my life. So.
And that's so special that you have that. And, I'm sorry to hear that he had passed suddenly, but that's great that you guys were able to have that moment to hold on to.
Right. It's just a reminder that what you do in your friendship group matters, and sometimes we don't know that we're making a difference, but we absolutely are, and just being honest and pushing people in the right direction who need a little shove.
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of a ripple effect. You never know the effect that one person's decision or words has on another person.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
If you've been feeling burned out, stressed, overwhelmed, or exhausted, the resources and courses at the Self-Care Institute are here to support you. The Self-Care Institute was founded by Dr. Ami Kunimura and provides support for individuals and organizations with burnout prevention, burnout recovery, and stress management. I've personally taken a few of these courses and found them to be super helpful, both professionally and personally. The care you give yourself matters just as much as the care you give to others. But if self-care is difficult for you, you're not alone. And the Self-Care Institute is here to support your well-being, resilience, and sense of fulfillment at work and at home. For more information, visit selfcareinstitute.com or go to the show notes and click on the link.
Right. Because I had one friend in specific who was like, you're kidding me. Go get those printed and let's go. And then she was the kind of friend who would text and say, did you give it to him? And then was going to give you a hard time if you didn't. So kudos to her.
Nice. It's always good to have those best friends, right?
Right. And it matters. So
excellent. I'm going to pivot a little bit. So you live in the Houston area. If someone was to come to your city, what is a restaurant or even 2 restaurants that you would recommend to tourists?
Oh, well, Houston is a great place to eat because there's an international vibe here. You can get almost anything, but you absolutely would have to start with Tex-Mex because that is what it's all about here. But, most people would send you to Papacitos, which is a great place. But there's a place called Lupe Tortilla, which is a little more underplayed. And I would send you there first because it's my favorite. If I'm going to go have fajitas, that's my favorite place to go. And I truly believe the Houston experience is a Houston restaurant too. That's the thing you got to go do here. Barbecue's great. Seafood is incredible. But I would start you if you had one meal. I would send you there and I would take you there. And if you tell them it's your first time, they bring you this great sampling of things. It's just it's a great place to go. And that's where I would send people on number 1.
Excellent. Yeah, I actually had Lupe Tortilla when I was in town last time and I had never had it before. It's so good. It is so good.
Yeah. And their menu is a little more expansive. Papacitos has changed their menu where it's smaller. You can get a lot of traditional Mex dishes on Lupe's menu too. Like if you want to try it all.
Excellent. What would your 10-year-old self, if your 10-year-old self could travel forward, where would your 10-year-old self want to go to eat in Houston?
Oh, my 10-year-old self, she would have messed it all up. She would have wanted to go, like, if the neon sign was really big, she'd be in. Like, if there was a salad bar, she would think that was all that. So I'm trying to think of where she would want to go. She'd probably want to go to the Golden Corral. Who knows? Like, with the expansiveness, would really get into her head. I'd have to help her out on that.
The more the merrier in terms of food, right?
Yeah, her eyes would bulge and she'd be in for all the free desserts, but she's 10. I mean, what do we want from her? She wants the free soft serve ice cream. I take her, I guess. So
nice. I feel like everyone really wants the free soft serve ice cream, like I don't think
I think we all want it. We just don't want to admit it. That's the thing about having kids that's great, or nieces and nephews or cousins or whatever, however you can get into it, neighbors. You take them and then all of a sudden you're like, I didn't mean to get a Nerf gun. I mean, they all wanted one, like there's something beautiful about that, because then you could do it again.
Yeah, just you getting in touch with your inner child,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
That's so great. So if you could be any fictional character for a day, who would you be?
Fictional character. I think I would be. Oh, that's such a tough question. I think I would be. Wow. I don't know why I think I want to be on Downton Abbey, but I think I would like to be Mrs. Patmore, the head cook on Downton Abbey, because I think that'd be an incredible perspective for a whole day to try to survive that and see what it was like. Be like, I think it'd be easy to want to be upstairs and be one of the rich people, but I'd rather see how it works, like how hard that work really was, and what it was like to really be down there into it and have to spend a 12-hour day or a 14-hour day, see if I was up for the task.
Do you enjoy cooking?
I do. So that'd be the other thing for me, to see how she did what she did. I'd almost maybe have to be an assistant, because I don't think I could pull off Mrs. Patmore. I'd have to be like one of the underlings, because I don't think I could handle doing what she did. So
yeah, I think cooking is intense, but you throw it back in time with ovens and things that are completely different than nowadays, and it's like, oh my goodness.
And like preparing, like she would have had to prepare like quails and ducks and pheasants. I have no idea how to do any of that, but I'd like to see it done. I like the idea. I mean, of trying to experience how much work that would be, in a realm that I experience daily. What if that was your reality? And I think it goes back to underappreciated characters, like underappreciated people who you don't like. I couldn't survive at 14 hours, but she's going to do it for 65 years and just be expected to pull it off.
Yeah. Such a great point there. Such a great point. We recently passed the Thanksgiving holiday here in the States, and I was just wondering, is there something that you are most thankful for from this past year?
This past year, I have a child, my oldest child, as struggled to find themselves, and actually bravely wrote 21 people a letter kind of describing where they're at in their life, a handwritten letter, including me and, our entire family and our family friends. I think it's one of the bravest things I've ever seen in my life. And I think I'm most thankful that this kid, who it's not a kid, kid's 27, but, was brave enough to write that letter. And, the people who did know and the people who didn't know, write all those people a letter. And I think I'm most thankful because when we got to Thanksgiving, it was the first time we'd seen our child since they wrote the letters. And so to have them come Thanksgiving and it feel like a whole different world for them, I'm very thankful for that.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, not without bumps and serious reservations on everyone's part, and not without fear. But I think that's the point of, again, back to sharing. When we share our authentic self, and this person did it on a whole nother level, but I think what comes afterwards, like after all the angst, after all the worry, and then it's not universally accepted, nor was my book or my story, nor was my child's story. But when you get to the other end, when you've done that sharing and you exhale and see the benefit of it. I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing, and to have to watch my kid do that was incredibly satisfying, and and I mean, really moving, and that it's a great thing, and it's a very brave thing, and yeah, I'm super thankful for that.
It's excellent. It sounds like you've learned so many wonderful lessons from your book. What are you hoping that readers will get out of it?
Well, I mean, I think the very first thing is I wrote the book as a humorous book, and I'm kind of a humorous person. I've been called a satirist, which is probably the biggest compliment I've been given. But I mean, if you laugh out loud, I mean, that's going to make me just about as happy as anything else. So that's number one. And I think to be entertained by the nostalgia, because I think even if you weren't from 1978, some of it's hilarious, like the lack of phones, the lack of computers, the lack of an internet. I mean, that's all thought provoking. So entertained, laugh out loud. But I think more than anything, to relate to little Amy and think, what would I do in her shoes, and to really think out what that would mean for you emotionally. Maybe do your own little trip back in time and your own thoughts, and think, what would I learn from that? Just seeing what little Amy did, no matter what era you grow up in. And then I think finally, like I mentioned earlier, to come to the realization that your story matters, no matter how exciting it is or plain it is, or to matter to you and the people that you love enough to share.
That's excellent. Well, Amy, thank you so much for being on the show. Listeners, you can purchase Amy's story, You Cannot Mess This Up, a true story that never happened. It sounds absolutely fantastic. Like I said, I can't wait to dig into it. And one lucky listener will be getting a copy of the book. But Amy, before I let you go, anything else you'd like to say to our listeners?
No, just thank you for listening. If you want to contact me, you can go to amydaughters.com. And I love to hear from readers. And I promise you, I will communicate back with you. I love hearing people's memories and, if they relate to the story or any other thing you want to discuss.
Excellent.
And thank you for having me on, Tammy. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome, Amy. An absolute pleasure. Listeners, check the show notes for links to purchase the book. And don't forget to enter the giveaway, details pending. And as always, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Creative Piecemeal. We hope today's episode left you feeling inspired. This podcast is independently created and produced by the host, Tammy Takaishi. More details about today's guest can be found in the show notes, along with links to the podcast's socials, merch store, and ways to support arts organizations AHA Broadway and New Normal Rep, both near and dear to Tammy's heart. Don't forget to visit creativepiecemeal.com, the official podcast website, where you can leave fan mail, write a review, explore Tammy's blog, and discover the growing collection of episodes. Special thanks to our audio engineer, Alex Repetti. Additional narration by Dante Jace. Let's keep celebrating creativity in all its forms.